Hi folks, and welcome to our second installment on documentary. In this video, we're going to be taking a close look at Planet Earth 2, especially a very close look at the sloth sequence, and we're going to think about all the ways in which Planet Earth 2, even though it's a nature documentary, emphasizes and uses all of the techniques of classical Hollywood narration. So this is the sloth sequence from Planet Earth 2, Episode 1, Islands. Just stopping at every moment, we can make a claim about the relationship between film as document and the manipulation that goes on in creating a kind of factual account of what's happening on screen.
The tiny island of Escudo, off the coast of Panama. Home to the pygmy three-toed sloth. This is a male, and life here suits him well. Mangroves provide all the leaves he can eat, and there are no predators to worry him. Island life may seem idyllic, but it comes at a price.
Think about what the narration is doing. It's doing less work to establish, say, a series of factual bits of information. It's more so inflecting that kind of information with a narrative interest, right? It's saying that life is good for this animal. However, something is not perfect. There's a bit of conflict, a bit of desire or need, and then we're going to create a little story out of it.
There are only a few hundred pygmy sloths in existence, and he needs a mate.
Okay, so the problem has to do with not many pygmy sloths.
And he needs a mate.
There's not many sloths, he says, and he needs a mate. Therefore, it's going to be difficult to find the mate. So now we know what the segment's going to be about. It's going to be a romance narrative, all right? Or it's going to be some kind of desire or pursuit of a mate. And we have a genre for that in Hollywood called romance. Now, the sound of, presumably, the mating call of the other sloth. Now, what's really interesting here is that we have no information that guarantees that that sound was heard at this moment. In fact, we know that the camera did not pick up that sound because all of the sound in Planet Earth 2 is not recorded live. It is manufactured in the studio. Often, yes, to approximate the sounds that the animals do create, but of course, there's some liberties there created so that we can get immersed in this world.
That's an enticing call from a female.
Notice that beautiful moment in which the sound, the second call of the female, is perfectly synchronized to the movement of the head of the sloth to the right. This gives us the impression, A, that the sound comes from somewhere over here, right? And of course, that the sound, more basically, is actually happening and can be heard by this animal.
Somewhere out there.
Notice you heard the sound once again. They made the sound much more faint as the camera was much more far away, right? This is all manufactured. You heard it right there. The distance of the camera, once again, has perhaps little to do with the volume of the sound because we have no way of understanding the relationship between the cameras and the sound. And often the cameras are using incredible zoom lenses. So while we think we're very close to the animal, we may in fact be very far away.
This, for a sloth, is a quick reaction.
Think again about the way in which what we hear manufactures or changes our relationship to what we're seeing. Attenborough has told us that this is a quick reaction. Clearly, there's a bit of kind of humor involved because sloths are notorious for moving very slowly. But I think telling us that his reaction is quick makes us believe, in fact, that we're looking at a quick reaction, when in fact we don't have the expertise to discern the bodily speed of this animal. There's one little editing Hollywood detail that some of you may be picking up on that is extremely subtle, but extremely useful. The sloth is moving from screen left to screen right. in every single part of this sequence. He's facing to the right. He moves his head to the right when he hears the call. The camera moves from left to right. Now he's swimming left to right. And then he climbs the tree left to right. Now I'm being redundant to emphasize the fact that screen direction is always a choice when you're making a movie. All it depends on is where you put the camera. We could easily, for instance, put the camera on the other side of the sloth, right? And then it would be moving from right to left. You can also, and this is very clever and very true, you can reverse or mirror the footage that you capture very simply with an editing software, right? And this is actually done a lot in movies. So let's continue watching from where we left off.
The problem is, there's deep water between them. So what should any red-blooded sloth do? Swim, of course.
I'm going to pause right there. Why? Because what this shot is, all of you should know this because you're an intro film, this is what we call a POV shot. And POV shots are a useful convention in Hollywood editing to give us the illusion that we are seeing through the eyes of a person. Now, we know that it's impossible to literally see through the eyes of a person, but we use this convention in a fictional medium in order to provide some kind of access to what it's like to see something from their perspective. But this is not a fiction. This is a documentary. And so we're given this to provide the impression that we're seeing from the point of view of the animal. There is a rhetoric that is trying to get us to be immersed in the position of this animal, a kind of anthropomorphizing of an animal that, frankly, we don't know what it's like to be inside of their eyes, yet alone their mind.
Could this be her? He does his best to put on a turn of speed. But she's not the one. She already has a baby, and she won't mate again until it leaves her in about 6 months' time.
I hope you take it to be significant, given our line of questioning, that both sloths, who are assumed to be in the same place, maybe feet away, are never shown to be in the same shot. We're given a series of 4 shot reverse shots, and the sense of their being in the same place is maximized by screen direction, right? Boy sloth looks right, girl sloth looks left, and the pattern is repeated. Screen direction really does enhance our sense that two things are next to each other and that they are facing each other. Now, I'm not saying that this, in fact, was not there. I'm not saying that the 2 sloths were, in fact, not in the same tree, but I'm saying that nothing about the camera, about the image, would guarantee that. In fact, I would guess that if they had both sloths next to each other, they would have captured it in a 2-shot. Again, I'm not trying to say, be very, very skeptical that everything you're seeing is a lie. I just simply want to separate the power of the camera to index the actuality of the movements of these sloths versus the constructed representational truth, or the fact that these 2 animals are looking at each other. Editing does suppress the indexical power of the camera. But we can also think about all the tenets of classical Hollywood narrative that are being exhibited here. Psychologically defined individuals, right? Yes, it's a sloth, but it was presented to us as having a clear goal. In fact, it had a problem to solve. The problem was, there is a vast distance between me and my desired mate. Will I get there? And will she be available to me as a possible mate? What's amazing, of course, is that this was a romance, which is part of the classical Hollywood mode, having two stories, one of which is a romance. There's a conflict with others or with external circumstances, right? The conflict was, of course, the vast distance that was making it difficult for the slow sloth to get there. The characters of principal causal agency. And there's indeed a decisive victory or defeat. In this case, it's not a happy ending. There's that little moment at the end that suggests, and I'll just show you this one moment.
Even life on a paradise island can have its limitations. But at least she can't be far away.
It ends with another mating call. So what else can we take from this? How do we approximate, or how do we describe the Hollywood techniques on display here? Well, remember the Kuleshov effect. The Kuleshov effect is that name for the way in which the juxtaposition of different images can create impressions that were not there in the images by themselves. So we take this very neutral face of the actor, we juxtapose it with various things, and we get the impression of lust, or the impression of sadness, or the impression of hunger. We can branch out with that concept and think just the way in which we look at the sloth face, and then we pair it with David Attenborough's words, "That's an enticing call." We get two associations. One, the idea that this face is a listening face. It's hearing the call. And the second is that this face is a desirous face. It is enticed by the call, so much so that it will be motivated to move toward it. This face is indeed not an expressive one, not by our standards of human expression, just like the Kuleshov face, but we invest it with a particular kind of meaning based on editing. Now, I do have to admit that not all animals need the Kuleshov effect. Like this miserable little creature, which I think the show makes great advantage of by showing it in close-up in the same time as it gives us its miserable story. But I would also say that we should be wary of believing that this face is in fact as miserable as it looks, because the ways in which human expression is codified amongst humans is very, very rarely easily mapped onto other creatures, even though other creatures can look to us sad-eyed and sad-mouthed. So what do the producers of this show say about the role of editing? It's very, very interesting. In fact, I want to give them a voice here. They say, this is producers Michael Gunton and Emily Napper on the show's editing. They say, once we are back from a shoot, we know how the story developed on location, and we then edit the shots together to present that story to our audience. Editing is used primarily to compress time and allow different perspectives to be seen throughout the sequence. Well, that seems rather reasonable, right? They know how the story occurred, and that they keep that story in mind, and then they edit things accordingly. I can't say whether this is accurate or this is erring on the side of self-promotion, but I do want you to acknowledge the ways in which they acknowledge that editing does indeed suppress the material indexicality of the camera. They know that they're creating something that is heavily edited, and that you have to take it on faith that what they're producing is in accordance with the factual reality that they witness with their own eyes, right? What else can we say about this issue? Think about match on action. For example, match cuts or match on action shots produce illusions of continuity, like when you have one animal jump from one place to another. So to produce a similar line of inquiry, how do I know this is the same leap? It's 3 shots. I don't, in fact, know it's the same leap. In fact, it could be multiple leaps stitched together. Now, are they lying by stitching together 3 leaps into one? The idea is there's bound to be some stretching of the indexical truth of the camera. And we have to just both think about how we can learn about that, but also maybe in some cases give the show the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're not actually breaking any contract by stitching together 3 leaps into one. Same thing goes for Foley sound. They don't have the technology to capture sound in the same way that they capture image. When you watch that again and again and again, your mind tells you there's no way that could be an actual sound. It sounds too Hollywood. Also, the movement of the creature, and in fact, this entire sequence is almost all slow motion. and slow motion is not a material fact of the real world. And so it should not produce sound that sounds as if it is in regular motion. But that's exactly how the information is presented to us here. People talk about this on the internet, right? This is a very popular program. And there's a tendency for spectators of documentary to get very, very self-righteous about this question. And what's interesting is they're not hiding this. You go on YouTube and you can look up these featurettes that show the artistry of Foley sound.
We're trying to create what you think you should hear, but I'd say 99% of the time it's shot mute. A lot of things are shot off speed, they use very long lenses, they use various devices to give lovely tracking shots, they use helicopters, they use drones, all sorts of stuff. And all those things aren't very good for sound because you tend to hear them a lot more than you do the animal or whatever it is that's a long way away. So we spend a lot of time trying to recreate what you would hear if you were there. So it's very similar to drama in that respect. It's kind of a bit different to normal documentary where you start with sound that's been recorded of people talking and you add things to it. With natural history, you tend to start with nothing.
They're not hiding the fact that they're manufacturing sound, right? In many ways, Planet Earth 2 wants you to know that it is both real and true, but also the product of artistry, the product of kind of a Hollywood-esque talent for manufacturing reality. So what else can we say about the techniques of manufactured truth or manufactured factuality in Planet Earth? Well, one of the things that the show does is it uses fictional genres in order to structure our expectations and to guide our attention and to get us invested in particular kinds of stories. So I think that all of these particular episodes from the show have possible genres we might attach them to. The clearest is, I think, the romance / the rom-com of the Sloth. We also might think of the melodrama and action of the Komodo dragon sequence, their survival and coming of age film of this baby lemur, the action suspense of the snake chase, and the very distinct family melodrama of the penguins, right? That sequence is all about the family unit. And once again, humans have family units, animals have family units, but we should be skeptical of the ways in which we so easily map one onto the other, right? And this is clearly being shown to invest our sympathies by our attachments and our familiarity with familial melodrama forms, right? Dad sacrifices himself to go on a journey to come back and feed his kids, right? That is the melodramatic form of that story. Okay, so just to wrap up, in this lesson, we continued our lesson about the distinction between what is documented by the camera in a documentary and what is manufactured by artistic choices in a documentary. And we looked at Planet Earth 2 as a nature documentary that heavily leans on the manufacturing or creation side of things, including things like Foley sound design, narration, editing, and in some instances, places where what we see cannot be guaranteed by what the camera captured.